think I know better than anyone that there's a whole bunch of candidates out there that are less than ideal for this year's local body election. But that doesn't mean that there aren't some great candidates running as well all over the motu. So I figured I'd sit down, have a chat to some of them, learn about what it is that they want to bring to the table, see who it is that's running with it this election. Hello there, kia ora, welcome to the show. We're going to be sitting down with some of the people putting their hand up for your vote from all over the motu to learn a little bit about their vision for their communities, the kaupapa they want to lead with, and how they intend to achieve what they lay out. Joining me today from the capital city, it's first-term councillor who, according to the press, is leading the charge against eyesores, Ben McNulty. Kia ora, Ben, how are you doing today?
Kia ora, Paul. Very well, and yourself?
Yeah, busy day. Seems to happen when elections crop up and the voting forms come out and everybody's like, what do I do? Who do I vote for?
It's funny that people want to know about their candidates, an interesting coincidence.
It's always really promising that people want to know about their candidates. I just really hope that translates to people getting out and voting. That for me is the really important part. And if they vote for people who I think are awesome, that's even better for me. But of course, it's up to them and to how they decide who to vote for. One of the questions I get...
My last spiel on the doors when I do the door knocking is literally 40% of people in my ward put their hand up last time. So whoever you vote for, just please vote, because you get the council you vote for.
Yeah. Or the one that you don't, I think is also a really important thing. If you don't vote, you're letting your voice be said by other people, and that's not a good position to be in. Nobody wants to have that happen to them. What was the voter turnout for your electorate last time, for your ward?
Yeah, so in my ward it was 40%. I think for Wellington the average it was 44%. So Takapū was below the Wellington average, and we're the largest ward as well. So it was interesting because we had 3 new councillors come in last time, completely brand new. So there's a little bit of a lack of knowledge, I think, that's endemic in local government that probably drove that. But I would really love to see Wellington City get to that 50% mark. I know that's a low bar in itself, but if we could get half plus one, that would at least give some sort of, mandate to the new council coming in.
Oh, yeah. I was talking about Hamilton in a recent video. They got 29%. As a standalone district, they had the lowest in the country. South Auckland, there were a couple of suburbs there that were less than 20% of voter turnout. And it's so hard to represent a community that doesn't come out and have their say. And it's such an important thing for people to do.
And when council starts working, you notice it. The garbage doesn't get collected, or the pipes break, or your neighbours are having a party and noise control don't show up. Like, you notice it. It's the real immediate stuff. Central government, it can take decades to fuck the health system. But, the council stuff is very immediate. So it always boggles the mind.
Yeah, I was at a Meet the Candidate event here in my district for the North Shore, and it was a fascinating example of the candidates getting up and saying things like, roads, footpaths, potholes, things like that, parks and that kind of stuff, which is fine. It's what councils do. But what the public wanted to hear about were more long-term plans and community building projects. What do you do about this park space that our kids go to, or this a place that puts on events? Or I found that a really interesting dichotomy between what the candidates are trying to sell and what the public want to hear. I think it's a really good reminder for people as well to get out and meet candidates and talk to them so they can get an understanding of what's on offer. Now, speaking of what's on offer, tell me about your vision for Wellington.
Look, so in a sense, we're already on the road to it. We are, in our long-term plan, we went with Puniki, the creative capital where people and nature thrive. As a city, we are the only major city in the world rewilding. I look out in my trees in the morning. I'm in Johnsonville, the northern suburbs of Wellington, and there are tui, the occasional kiriru. I used to have to go up to Lake Taupo as a kid to see those birds. They are everywhere, and we have an incredible opportunity with science. We have biodiversity researchers coming in from all across the world into Wellington to study what we are doing because it's so unique. So in a sense, it is doing what we've started now. It is an affordable city where people can afford to live. That means renting or buying a home. It's a city with jobs and opportunity, with vibrancy and fantastic community facilities and opportunities. It's Wellington just, probably 5-10 years from now. But we can, I don't want to be careful words. It's just getting that essence of Wellington back and then taking it to the next level. But nature is at the heart of what the city is going to be and why it's going to be such an internationally unique place to live and work over the next few decades.
I was talking to Tori the other day and she told me you got Kiwi back again.
Yeah, yeah, like so there's capital care, and I think this is the incredible thing that some a Labour councillor have a very strong view in the role of government to influence outcomes. But in this
Mhm.
job, I've become at times quite a libertarian, and in a sense, when I mean that, I mean that we have these community groups doing incredible mahi, and the council's role there is just basically to get there and provide some funding, and we don't need to drive or lead it whatsoever, and that's Capital Kiwi. So they've got Kiwi that's come to the hills of Broadmeadows, which is just one suburb underneath where my ward
Mhm.
begins. There's preparation because we believe they're going to come into Tawa and Johnsonville over the next few years, and that's just wild, like absolutely incredible that you could like open your back door and there's a Kiwi.
Yeah, it would be amazing. I mean, they screech. They make a hell of a noise, but
Oh,
it's so cool.
what's my vision, Paul? A world where like your community Facebook group is like, oh, those bloody screeching Kiwi keeping it up. We've got to
Yeah,
do something about, that's the vision, right? Like when the Kiwi
that's
have
the
become a
vision.
nuisance, it's so endemic.
Yeah, yeah, that happens all over the country. People who want something 10 years ago, now it's a problem because they got what they wanted.
Yes,
But if it's
absolutely.
Kiwi, yeah, in terms of things that would be annoying people, I think you'd find, yeah, the Kiwi's annoying, but it's cool. Uh,
I
it would
do.
be
I do
awesome to have
remember a
something
letter to
like
the Post. This was like over a decade ago when Zealandia, because that's the eco sanctuary that's spurred on this rewilding, was new. And I do remember a letter to the Post complaining literally about being woken up by like tui and things like that and Karori. And it's like, well, you could be woken up by gunshots. There's a lot worse in different
yeah,
parts of the world that you could be dealing with rather than a bird singing a nice song.
yeah. I people have to complain, I think is what it boils down to. That they will always find something to complain about.
Absolutely. But
When
let's
you're
complain
out
about.
there, yeah, oh yeah. Well, when you're out there talking to people, how do you sell your vision for what's coming for the city?
So I have quite a unique area of Wellington. So look,
Hmm.
the stories are pretty well known nationally. Wellington is in it's in the shit. Central government has not been kind to us. The economy here, it's hurting, and you're seeing that in the hospitality collapse. And I think one of the key things, and we'll get to the question that's hurting Wellington particularly, is the rolling, ongoing nature of those cuts. Because there are a lot of public servants still in work, but they are not renovating their kitchens. They're not going out for dinner. They're holding
Hmm.
their bank account balances going just in case I'm next. And so you just have all this capital that's just basically sitting in bank accounts and not being spent out. So there's a lot of anxiety and fear in Wellington. And you've seen Wellington's population go back in the census. However, the Takapū Northern Ward, we're growing. In the census, we grew
Hmm.
by 2,200 people. We are Wellington's growth corridor. That's predominantly in greenfield housing, but we also do are slated for a lot of intensification. And that growth's a real opportunity. So you have a little bit of a disparate perspective, I think, on a door in Newlands than you might in say Miramar, where there's a bit of optimism that's sitting into people. And I know in Newlands there's this new development that's coming on at the moment that's going to be about 20 apartments and new cafes and businesses like that. And people are just really excited for that vibrancy, that local aspect. A lot more people are working from home. So in a sense, it's selling the vision is people are kind of already on board. Like everyone in the city, from Ray Chung to Tory Vado, will agree it's a good thing that we are rewilding. Well, I hope Ray Chung would. I don't know. It depends what day of the week. But people are on board with that vision to an extent, and I think what they're more worried about is more in the immediate term, just making sure that the wheels stay on and that we actually continue on that pathway. So it's not a big sell of like this is what Wellington could be. People know Wellington can be there and can get there, but they're very immediately a bit anxious about the impact of government, the ongoing rolling cuts. I do think the city council, I will put some critique, hasn't been necessarily very receptive to that environment. We've added a little bit of we've kept going as if it was 3 years ago when Wellington was a boomtown, and we haven't, allayed some of the concerns that people have. So, yeah, the kind of answer to that is that people are there with the vision. They just want to know that we are going to get there with all the wheels still on the car, and that we'll just get through this particularly rough patch. It's that immediate term anxiety, but not so much the long term vision.
As somebody who's never lived in Wellington myself, but love the place, it's one of my favorite cities in the world. I've always had the impression that Wellingtonians don't like change when it comes to the heritage status of their buildings. And there are some absolutely stunning heritage buildings, and there are some that are not quite so stunning. Um, I think a lot of it was actually exemplified in the greenhouse debate that cropped up
Yeah,
around the
yeah.
council table. Um, Why are there such strong feelings around this topic in Wellington?
So I think Joel McManus, he really coined it when we did our district plan decisions last year, because our district plan is the single best piece of work this council has done, and it's leading in our, we legalised housing. We've
Mhm.
legalised building housing in Wellington on a mass scale. He coined it as the new city and the old town. And you actually notice it if you look at the bios and videos of a lot of the candidates that are sitting to the right, especially in the Ray Chung ticket. They sort of harken back to Wellington's golden days, which was sort of the year 2000, Lord of the Rings. And that was when we kind of could have it all. We didn't have the population intensification discussion because we weren't seeing that flow of people coming in, and things were really good. And I think there's a part of our city that thinks we just have to go back to that. But the reality is, we have to grow, and we are growing, as I said, 2,200 people, and that requires change to how the city looks and feels and where people live. I love that people are living in my ward and further out from the city, but we know from marginal cost of infrastructure, it's much better when they live in the city and they intensify. So the district plan made a massive change to where and what kind of housing can be built anywhere in the city, and that had a real ripple through the old town. People that have sort of catastrophized, there are going to be no old villas left in Mount Victoria in 100 years' time. But then they'll also tell us that the changes have done absolutely nothing to increase the ability of housing. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say this plan will destroy all the housing, but it hasn't worked because no housing's being built. So I think that kind of sits at the crux of it. There is a younger, more urban professional coming in. Also, just even in the planning and heritage space, like the people in that space. Old green environmentalism was very much around preserving buildings, what we have, reusing. And absolutely there's still green fundamentals to that. But the new sort of movement is actually about how we live, work, and play in places, being close, and how we commute to services and things like that. And so you're seeing a little bit of a generational change. So it's an interesting debate in Wellington, because I think at the crux of it, there are people that think if we could just go back to what it was 20 years ago, all of Wellington's problems would be fixed. Reality is we're never going to get back to there. The solutions of the past aren't going to be the solutions of the future. And so you have this new change coming through, and that causes anxiety. It causes people to be challenged about where they would normally sit. Yeah.
So I've noticed talking to candidates all over the country and doing research into all of these different races, there is a very much it's a line between conservative and progressive candidates, where conservatives want to stop change and go back. Progressives are like, well, how do we embrace change and go forward? And both opinions I think are valid. Everyone has their own views on these things. The candidates who seem to want to stop that change and that progress and go back, they use a lot of sort of short-term cosmetic arguments, potholes and speed bumps and too many buses kind of arguments. When you're out there talking to people, and I know you've been door knocking almost non-stop on anytime you get a break from sitting around the council table, what are the issues that voters are actually saying to you? Look, this is the thing that we want council to deal with.
Yeah, so rates again, there is definitely a lot more short-term immediacy that people are thinking about right now. And look, the problem with that short-term thinking is that 3 years ago, when I first put my hand up for council, Cashmere Retirement Home, which was in Johnsonville, were relocating their residents into Lower Hutt because they couldn't find staff that could afford to live in Wellington. Rents through the roof. A three-bedroom house in Johnsonville, north of $1 million. Forget about it for care staff. That was the really immediate short-term past, and it's
Mhm.
yeah, now we are not going town anymore. We're very much in that bus town's schedule, but it's very easy to just immediately lose focus. That less than 3 years ago, we were deporting residents out of our city because people couldn't afford to live here. So I always have that discussion, just reminding people we don't want to actually repeat those mistakes of the short term past. Things will get better in Wellington. What comes up is, rates is definitely one of the ones on the door, but it's not this desire for the slash and burn that some of the candidates are running for, where like close the zoo and that kind of level. I just don't necessarily feel like the 30% more that I've been spending in my rates bill over the last 2 years, I'm seeing 30% more in services. And my line onto that is always, well, look, we have to spend an incredible amount of money in Wellington. Our infrastructure is in decay, and it's not just pipes, it's also our social housing assets, it's our community facilities that have been run down. But it's totally fair enough that you should see that money being spent wisely and stretched and all of that stuff. But then you also just get people that then start talking about, because that's sort of the first thing, the immediate thing is like, oh, my wallet. but once you get talking and into that more longer term perspective, the issues that come up are things like, yeah, the community facilities. I've had a really good conversation yesterday about climate change. I actually had to kind of unlock a part of my brain because I wasn't used to having as many climate change conversations. The selection was like, well, what
Hmm.
do you want to do about it? I was like, oh, well, actually, we have a green waste program that's going to be rolled out that's going to remove emissions from the landfill. We've got planning restrictions we need to look at around hydraulic neutrality for water. It just, I think people will start in that short term, but once you have those conversations about how actually, if we keep in that short term, people like open up and they really do think about any smorgasbord of topics. And of course, local stuff, yellow lines, school pickups, a
Hmm.
pipe that's not working, a piece of signage that they could do, a little mirror so that they can see coming out of their driveway. So it is really broad. But again, there is that bias at the moment to just think a bit in the short term. And that can be dangerous for getting councillors that are actually going to make those really good long term decisions, which you need around the table.
Um, Wellington Council has been vilified a little bit by the media and the government.
Just a
That
little.
they like to point at just a little bit. They like to point and go, "Come on, look at what these people are doing." Has that sort of media presence and central government attitude? Have you seen that filter through to the door knocking as well?
Yeah, a little bit. I think what people want, funnily enough, is a boring council. And that doesn't mean a
Mhm.
council that's just doing the basics. They just kind of don't want to hear about their council. That's more of the
Yeah,
broader thing. Is I don't want to know about nightlife or salacious gossip or mudslinging between councillors. And I'm not putting that on the mayor. That is not her fault that she's been vilified and had that
yeah.
crap thrown at her. But it's the stuff that gets into the ecosystem. So people kind of just want to have a boring council, I think, is the fundamentals in Wellington. And I mean, I do say, look, if you want a boring council, there is no one better than Andrew Little to lead a boring council in terms of politician that you want to lead there. No, say that with the utmost respect, but so it comes through. But yeah, I think they're more just sick of hearing about things, and they just rather sort of see some progress. I don't think it permeates necessarily into people necessarily believing everything that's out there, but they are confused and they are a little bit worried about, why is there so much noise around this council? And you know, we are the capital city and we have an absolute excess supply of journos and media here. It is
Hmm.
quite, I've always found it really fascinating that it is easier for me to probably pitch a national story to a journo here than a council like Richard Hills would be up your way in Auckland. Like, we
Yeah,
get more print and words and pages in Wellington, and we are 1/7 the size of Auckland Council. Like, there's a real
yeah.
disproportionate focus on the decisions and our weight and impact that we have nationally compared to like Auckland Council that have a gigantic, huge decision making reach.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it makes sense. Capital city, of course, you've got the media floating around and politicians, and there are quiet days where they've got to find something to write about. It's yeah, it's horrifying. Hey, this year, Wellington is one of about 40 councils that are being told that you have to have a referendum around the retention of Māori wards. It was not a particularly popular decision based on the feedback that came through the select committee process. I'm very curious to know what your perspective is around the conversations that are happening around that referendum.
Yeah, I think I can count on one hand the number of people I've spoken to that are upset, or sorry, would be voting not to retain the Māori ward.
Hmm.
When it comes up, people just see it, firstly as pure central government overreach. They're seeing it from a government that hasn't been particularly friendly to Wellington, and they're seeing it, like I've talked about some rather serious issues in terms of the rates bills and things like that, and then they're reading stories about rearranging the order of operations on the passport so that New Zealand goes ahead above Aotearoa. So they're seeing like a real hypocrisy in terms of a government that's laser focused on the cost of living, yet wants to
Mm.
get into a full culture war over Aoreo. So I think it is in Wellington. There's a real fire about it. I know, look, I mean, at the bottom of all my billboards, we literally have vote to keep the Māori ward because it is that essential
Hmm.
to the kaupapa of this council. And our outgoing Māori ward councillor, Nico Wineta, I think he has been a fantastic presence around this table. He's built a really large bipartisan respect from, the right wing and the left wing. He's definitely the best dressed and most eloquent of the bunch of us, but he's added such incredible value into the council. And I think that's the key thing, is that you're talking about is letting people choose to use their democratic right accordingly. And this referendum, people can see the transparency in terms of what it's been driven from. It's not been driven about better outcomes. On one hand, the government's criticising us about rates, caps, and wasteful spending and all those kinds of things. On the other hand, they're mandating that we have a multi-ward referendum at our own cost. So, that hypocrisy, I think the rank hypocrisy comes through on the doors, and people are pretty eager to send the government a clear message in Wellington that we are going to retain our multi wards and that they're important to us.
Does it surprise you that in such a political city that that's the kind of response you get, like the "fuck you government" kind of response, and the way that people make their decisions and how they vote?
Look, I mean, at the moment, because the public service has such a gigantic role in the city anyway. People are
Mhm.
feeling that sentiment
Yeah.
pretty full stop anyway when they're seeing staffing decisions that are being made in very arbitrary cut kind of ways, not cutting work that might not need to be done, but rather percentage based headcount reductions on programs that are actually going to save people money long term, like IT programs and things like that. So I mean, the sentiment there is very much already laid out. But again, it's just that rank hypocrisy of you're telling us about cost of living as your focus, and then you've decided to have an entire culture war on Reo in this country. The two are dramatically in ends. And I just thought what was really fascinating, there's a piece on donations that the Post did earlier this week. Andrew Little and Alex Baker, the left wing candidates, have been happy to tell
Mm.
people who their donors are in advance. The right wing candidates, not so much. Funny that. But
Hmm.
that Chris Finlayson, the former key government minister, was one of Andrew Little's donors, and he's declared $2,000. He would have very knowingly declared that amount because he would have gone, that will be public. People will know that
Yeah.
I am putting that forward. But that even shows you that, someone who's a really classic, liberal right wing conservative, he's looking at what this government's doing and saying, actually, I'm going to put a bit of a stake in the ground around the direction of our city.
Yeah, well, I suppose Finlayson's actually being very vocal against some of these culture war, anti-Maori decisions that the government's put out, and his role as treaty negotiations minister, it gives him this sort of background and information on it. It's quite fascinating to sit back and watch former Nats go, "Oh no, this is bad. This is really bad." I saw an interview with Jim Bolger the other day where he's sitting there going, "Why are you trying to stop people from learning Te Reo Māori? It doesn't achieve anything."
This is not the government of John Key, right? Like, this is the thing, and it's being dragged by two very reactionary, quite toxic coalition partners, and you see the weakness of the Prime Minister and all those decisions. But we could probably sit here for another half hour dissecting the
Yeah.
crappy
The,
decisions of the
the,
New Zealand government.
the Prime Minister at the time of recording.
We'll see.
Yeah. Hey, what do you think is the most important thing that voters should take on board when they cast their vote this year?
They need to think about the long term decisions of Wellington, because I talked about the degrading quality of our pipes. That's the most obvious one. Everywhere in Wellington, we've got on top of fixing leaks, but we haven't even started the job of replacing pipes in our city. Things like Kandala Pool and the Begonia House, people have strong issues on them, but those facilities weren't maintained. And that's part of why the bill has become so big at this point in time. If they had been maintained properly and put into a proper asset schedule, you wouldn't be having the bill coming against these other competing priorities. And in our social housing program, which is the same, we did a deal in 2007, the Clark government, 50-50 to basically upgrade to healthy home standards. The government's work was done within a few years. We only signed off starting our work in April this year, 14 years later. So all
Oh,
of
wow.
these are deferring decisions, and they've come due now when we're in post-COVID inflation, when the local economy has the absolute boot on it. So people need to realize that short-term focused thinking is only going to set up further problems down the road. And I think it is talking about candidates, what they're not just going to do in the first 100 days that they're elected. What are they going to vote for 5 years from now, for 10 years from now, from 20 years from now? What are the decisions that they'll be making which are actually going to save Wellingtonians money in the long run? And I can just quickly talk to like one of those ones, which is a really practical but like great environmental one, which is degassing our swimming pools. So most of Wellington's swimming pools are heated by gas. There's only one supplier in the city, so it's a monopoly, and the gas prices are on an upward trajectory. So we're degasifying our pools. Now, we'll save about $2 million in operational costs over the decade from doing that. but will also reduce a huge swath of council's own emissions. So those are like the complete win-wins. But if you were looking at that on the balance sheet, that $2 million saving doesn't come in towards the end of the decade, and there is an initial cost to do the capital work now. That's the exact kind of thinking where you could go, oh, well, we can defer that, but it saves people money in the long term. So I think having that long-term perspective in councillors that are going to answer what will you actually vote for that will look different in 5, 10, or 20 years should really be at front of people's minds, because we don't want to be back here where our infrastructure is absolutely up a shit creek in another 10 years' time. We'd like to make some tangible progress, I think.
You've got, if I remember correctly, you've got one of the fastest swimmers in the world in Wellington.
We did, Lewis Clareburt, and then he wasn't able
Yeah.
to train here for a myriad of operational issues, but it's won't go into. But we'd love to welcome him back.
I'm sure he would love to be back. Lewis, I've met him a few times. He's a lovely guy. Lovely
Yes,
guy.
yeah.
Very full of energy. It's a
I think you
loss
have
for
to be to
Wellington. But
swim 100 meters in about like 10 seconds. There's a certain type of individual.
oh, yeah, yeah, definitely. I'm sure North Shore is happy for him to be here, though.
Yeah, Auckland's always happy to take Wellington's success. We know that.
Yeah, it's a long history of it. As somebody who grew up in Hamilton, I know full well what it's like when other cities take your success stories.
Absolutely.
Terrible. Ben, thank you very much. Where can people find more information about your campaign?
Yeah, look, best place to go is benmcnulty.nz. That's my website. It talks about the priorities that I have for Wellington, my background, a bit about me, and why I'm actually in this position. And also, the Wellington City Council has a fantastic resource this election of videos for voters. So they've asked all candidates the same 4 questions, and 47 of 50 candidates have taken up that opportunity. And I think those videos are just a fantastic way, in a very neutrally presented, to just get a look and a feel of the people that are running as well. So I'd highly encourage anyone, especially in Takapū Northern, to watch all 7 of the videos for the candidates up this way and make their own call. And remember, it's preferential voting here in Wellington. You can vote 1 to 7. This is just for my ward. You can just number one person. You can number in the middle. Don't let people tell you how to vote. Vote how you wish.
Perfect. Thank you very much, and good luck.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
Hey, don't forget to give the video a like if you haven't done so already, and make sure you hit that subscribe button for the most in-depth coverage of local government elections anywhere in the motu.